just yesterday, Sony released a new firmware for the Sony A7 IV. Buried in those release notes was the fact that the Sony A7 IV was going to get focus bracketing, a feature previously only available to the Sony A7R V. So today I've come to my favorite waterfall to test this feature out, show everyone what it's all about, and how it can be used to improve your photography. I'm just kind of looking for a few compositions. Really what I'm trying to get is something that's going to allow me to take the best use of this feature of the focus bracketing. So what I'm looking for is something that's got a lot of detail very close to the ground, where I want to get my camera with a wide angle lens, I want to get my camera very close to that foreground subject. And that's going to require that I take more than one image of the entire scene in order to get it all in focus. I guess I can step back for a second and talk about why this feature exists. What does it actually enable? In any camera, lenses are only able to focus on one individual point, and you can get things, closer to you or further away than that point in focus, but it becomes very difficult. And when you are trying to deal with a scenario where you have to get something that's only a few centimeters, only a few inches away from the lens, as well as something that's meters away and then maybe hundreds of meters, hundreds of kilometers away in focus all in one lens, you really can't do it. There isn't a camera that's going to be able to do that. So what you have to do is you actually have to set your camera up on a tripod, take one photo of the foreground element, then usually one of the midground, maybe two of the midground, and then one of the background, allowing your lens to focus on those individual subjects for each shot. This is usually done manually. Usually you'll pick a focus point on the camera and you will take a picture of that shot, then you'll move the focus point, focus on that, take a picture, and so on and so on and so on. And then later in an editing software, usually Photoshop, you're able to blend those together so that you have only the in-focus parts of each image coming through in the final result. So that is called a focus stack, normally known as a focus stack. What focus bracketing allows you to do is automate a bit of that process. So rather than you needing to manually go through each shot, picking a new focus point, you're going to simply pick the first focus point, usually one that's closest to you, and then the camera will simply move the focus back and back and back until it gets X number of shots where all of them have some part of it's in focus, and then you can blend them together later, again, in Photoshop or something. So really to recap, focus bracketing allows you to do focus stacking, which is really great for macro photographers and for landscape photographers who either are dealing with narrow depth of field, narrow areas that are in focus, or want their maximum amount of their shot in focus to begin with. So they want to get, an in-focus shot of every single thing that's in their scene. Okay, well, I'm sitting in the river, and yes, I'm wet. The vantage point that I chose, let me flip the screen around, I'll show you exactly where I'm at, is I've chosen to go right over this piece of water here so that I can get this kind of, rock over here, and then ultimately the sort of waterfall in the background. Now, this waterfall, I think, needs a little bit of finessing, because the midground here, as you can see, just has this like big log across it, and then just this like field of rocks, and it's not particularly interesting. So what I usually choose to do when I'm here is either get like really close and step sort of beyond that midground, or in this case, I'm going to get really, really low to something to just sort of minimize the midground in a way that maybe it doesn't, it's not really visible anymore. But what that means is that I've found the perfect shot, the one that I was talking about, which is I'm very, very low to the ground, and I will have to get multiple shots to get everything in focus. Let me show you what that typically looks like. Okay, I hope you can see this on the back of the camera. What I have here is I've framed up my shot. This piece in the front is a foot away. Now, I could get closer, but a foot away is going to do a very good job, and also I think it works very well for this composition. This little rock is a foot away, and then I've got the whole waterfall with the sun lighting up these sort of nice yellow trees, and then also, the sides of the waterfall, and then this waterfall kind of crooked and flows to one direction, so I've just sort of centered it in the way that I think makes it look visually centered. It's very nice. But let me show you what I'm talking about when it comes to needing to get everything in focus. So I have my focus point here, and I'm going to focus on that. Maybe I'm at, f11 in order to get the shutter speed down to 0.6 of a second, which I think would be appropriate here. So f11. Now, if I zoom in, I can see that that part of the image, okay, now it's in focus. But then if I start going up, you can see that the waterfall is not in focus, and definitely these rocks at the top, not in focus. So what I would normally do is I would, maybe I'll create a divider frame to sort of set these images all together, so I sort of know which ones that I'm taking. I pick a point that's very close to the camera, so maybe I'll pick these rocks over here and just kind of check my focus, and then I'll take that shot with maybe a 5-second timer so that me touching the camera doesn't really shake the camera. I'll go in, I'll touch the camera again. I'll pick a point, in the midground, maybe a little bit further away, and focus on that. And then again, take this shot, 5-second timer, and I'll wait for it to take this shot, make sure everything is nice and stable. Then I will go up to the background here, and I'll pick something in the background, and I'll take that shot. And again, I'm doing this process over and over again, right? Where I'm picking a focus point, I'm hitting the shutter, I'm waiting for the timer to go off, I'm waiting for the shot to be taken, then I'm going in carefully, being careful not to move my tripod and move the camera too much, going in, selecting another focus point, doing it all over again. And it just takes an extra minute. During that time, the light may have changed. I might accidentally move the camera, and maybe I have to start all over again, because if I move the camera, then the shots, I'm not going to be able to line them up perfectly again to sort of blend them together. So with the focus bracket, that entire process becomes automated. It's a new drive mode. So I'll go into my drive modes and move down from my 5-second timer to this new bracket focus. You can see I've got a couple of different options. So the first one, this first option, I think it's not really say exactly what it does. This is step width. So what this actually does is it's how much the camera is going to move the focus point forward. And you have 10 options, all the way from very, very minimal to very, very wide. Now, it starts with this 4. I don't know what these numbers actually represent, but it says standard. So I'm going to go with standard. And then the next 3 numbers are actually the total number of shots you want it to take. And it's in fact not the total number of shots, it's the maximum number of shots. If your camera reaches infinity before this number, it will stop. It will just stop shooting. It won't try to go beyond that. Can't really go beyond that. So I've set this to what I think is a pretty ridiculous number of 50. Now, I think for this demonstration, I'll just do 20, but those are the sort of standard options. Now, if you go into the menu, you actually get a new menu setting in the camera for bracket settings, right? So inside the bracket settings, you now get focus bracket settings. And the first one basically just gives you do you want to shoot from this one and then beyond? But actually there's another, which is, would you like to shoot from your single focus point, then one back, and then everything beyond? So I'm actually going to do that, because that means that I'm picking a focus point, but then I'm getting some a little bit before that in focus. So maybe that gets some of this water in this case. I just like to try it out. You then get this exposure smoothing, which will allow for the exposure of the image to change a little bit over time. So if the light is changing, you might get a little less exposure on the background or more exposure on the background, depending on what happens. I'm going to leave that off and just sort of see what happens. And then the next is the shooting interval. So I've just selected shortest, which means it's just going to take an image every time it's ready to take an image. So let's go ahead and try this out. All right, well, I've been having so much fun with this. I actually switched over to my 14mm lens and got even lower, just to really maximize the sort of, number of shots that it takes for fun. Really is kind of enjoyable just to set everything up and hit the shutter button and let the camera sort of do the rest. Normally I like to have a lot of control over my camera, and it's not really that I like everything to be manual, it's that I like to be in like a Vulcan mind meld with everything that's happening with the camera. Well, this, you know, focus bracket setting doesn't really change that. I still have a really good idea of exactly what's happening, and so I do feel in control, and I feel you know, kind of amazed that this is just something that it can just do after so many times doing this manually. I have found a couple of caveats, which is if I go and actually to this setting over here, this focus bracket order, and I do the 0, then minus, then plus, it limits it to 3 shots total. And so I was trying that out a couple bits, and I was like, I really don't see why 3 shots, you know, maximum here. And I sort of looked at the shots and found that not all of them were in focus. So I came back over to this other one, which is 0, or like the first point that you take, and then plus everything. And that re-enabled me to, you know, take 20 shots. I've also tried a couple of these different step widths. So I think I went up to 7 and I went down to 2. 2 gave me all 20 of the shots. Normally I might take this in like 4, maybe 5 if I'm trying to be fancy about it. So I came back up to 4, this like standard step width, and I'm finding that it's giving me between 9 and 12 shots depending on like what I'm focusing on, and then also depending on the 16mm or 14mm lens. If you watch this thing happen, it's really quite amazing, because you see this workflow just kind of happening in real time, and it's a lot faster. Let's like do this together. So I'm focusing on this point down here, which is just this rock that's like very, very close. I can reach out and touch it. And then I'm just hitting the shutter button, and it's doing a little bit of self-timer because I've got that bracket self-timer built in. So I think it's doing 5 seconds. And then it just sort of gives me this like focus bracket shooting, right? It tells me it's doing that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just keeps doing them. Now, it's not going to take any more than 20 images. I think that sounded like 7 or 8. But if you go and take a look at them, you can tell that like, yeah, it really is changing the focus point. It really is changing what's happening with each of them. So now at this point, I'm just kind of messing around with the shutter speed to get the movement of the water just right. Kind of tilting the camera up and down a little bit to get a little bit more of the sky, that type of thing. But really having a great time with it. I think this is gonna dramatically change the way that I think about taking photos, because oftentimes I'll choose not to do a focus stack because I don't have enough time, right? Maybe the sun is rising, the light is changing, or something's moving that I really need to, you know, I need to capture quickly. And I think I'm gonna rethink that a little bit, because I'll have fewer times where that's, you know, the speed is gonna actually like prevent me from doing that, and more times where I can take this option and really like try that out and maximize it and see how it goes. Oh, I think I see a nice composition over there. Anyways, I think I might go shoot something over there, see what that looks like. I hope you have a good understanding for focus bracketing. I know this is available on lots of other camera systems, and I think that's really wonderful. I think it's very exciting for me that it's come to Sony, and it's a real step forward, you know, beyond them just releasing like video features. Now they're really getting into like more professional photography features. This one I really, really love, and I hope that this is something that you can work into your workflow.
I've been acting like a wild man, sleeping like a child. You're so luminous and vibrant, I'm always in bloom for you.
Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.